Charlie Kirk's story is also deeply reflective of the changing landscape of American conservatism in the 21st century. His journey illustrates the transition of conservative politics from quiet think tank debates to a fiery, youth-driven, media-saturated movement. The forces that shaped him are the same forces reshaping the Republican Party and the national dialogue: the rise of social media as a political battlefield, the growing frustration with higher education institutions, and the populist surge that culminated in Donald Trump's presidency. This biography not only honors Kirk's personal achievements, but also provides insight into the evolution of political activism in modern America. Forward. In the grand tapestry of American public discourse, there are moments and figures that stand out for their profound impact. They are the architects of ideas, the catalysts for change, and the voices that rally a generation. Charles J. Kirk, a young man from the suburbs of Chicago, is undoubtedly one such figure. His journey is not merely a tale of political commentary or organizational success, but a testament to the power of conviction, the importance of foundational principles, and the unwavering belief that a better future is built upon a well-informed and engaged citizenry. This story is an exploration of that journey. It is an account of the early influences, the pivotal moments, and the unyielding drive that transformed a high school student with a bold idea into the founder of one of the nation's most influential youth movements. Through these pages, we aim to honor the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk by examining the principles he championed and the movement he helped build. A movement dedicated to the preservation of freedom, the pursuit of truth, and the empowerment of the next generation. Part 1. The Early Life and Rise of Charlie Kirk. Introduction. Charlie Kirk is one of the most recognizable names in contemporary American political activism. As the founder of Turning Point USA, TPUSA, a conservative student organization that has grown into a massive force on college campuses and beyond, Kirk has shaped political conversations for a new generation of young conservatives. His rise to prominence has not been conventional. Marked by his decision to forego a traditional college education, his embrace of grassroots mobilization, and his unique ability to leverage media platforms to expand his influence. This first part of the biography will cover Kirk's early years, formative influences, the creation of TPUSA, and the strategies that fueled his rapid ascent. Kirk's formative years were not only shaped by his family, but also by the broader environment of suburban Chicago. Growing up during the post-9/11 era, he was part of a generation exposed to heated national debates about security, patriotism, and America's role in the world. This backdrop influenced his skepticism toward globalism and his appreciation for American exceptionalism. Teachers and peers recall that while Kirk was not a traditional standout student, he was relentless in pursuing debates in class and often challenged prevailing opinions with unusual confidence for his age. Childhood and family background. Charlie Kirk was born on October 14, 1993, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. He grew up in Prospect Heights, a middle-class community not far from Wheeling. His father, Robert W. Kirk, was an architect who later became a project manager for Trump Tower in New York City, a detail that Kirk has frequently mentioned in interviews. His mother was a homemaker who devoted much of her time to raising Charlie and his siblings. From an early age, Kirk exhibited a natural curiosity for politics, history, and current events. Unlike many teenagers who gravitated toward sports or entertainment, he gravitated toward talk radio, particularly conservative figures like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. These programs influenced his worldview, sharpening his skepticism toward big government and instilling in him a strong sense of patriotism. Kirk attended Wheeling High School, where he became active in community activities. Though he did not excel as a top student academically, he was described as ambitious, articulate, and relentless when he found a cause worth pursuing. This persistence, combined with his interest in public policy, set him apart from many of his peers. First steps into politics. Kirk's earliest forays into political activism began during high school. In 2010, he volunteered for Mark Kirk's, no relation, U.S. Senate campaign in Illinois. This experience offered him a glimpse into the mechanics of electoral politics, organizing canvassing efforts, distributing literature, and learning the discipline required in the political world. However, it wasn't until 2012 that Kirk truly began to carve out a place for himself in conservative activism. At 18 years old, he wrote an essay for Breitbart News arguing against progressive narratives about wealth inequality and privilege. His writing caught the attention of influential conservatives, including Bill Montgomery, a retired marketing executive and Tea Party activist who would later become Kirk's mentor. Montgomery saw potential in Kirk and encouraged him to pursue activism full-time instead of attending college. Decision against college. In an era where higher education was increasingly viewed as an essential step toward career success, Kirk made the unconventional decision not to attend college. He had been accepted to Baylor University, but deferred enrollment to pursue activism. With Montgomery's guidance, Kirk recognized a gap in conservative organizing. There were few structured groups targeting high school and college students with a consistent positive message about free markets, limited government, and American exceptionalism. This realization became the foundation for Turning Point USA, which Kirk and Montgomery co-founded in June 2012. Kirk was just 18 years old at the time. The initial months of TPUSA were marked by challenges. Kirk recalls cold calling donors, often receiving rejection after rejection, before finally securing enough funds to pay for basic travel and promotional materials. Early recruits were drawn not just to the principles TPUSA championed, but also to Kirk's infectious energy and clarity of purpose. Unlike many political organizations that relied heavily on hierarchy, TPUSA gave local leaders autonomy, which allowed the group to grow quickly and flexibly, adapting to each campus environment. This bottom-up model proved effective in creating loyalty among members and accelerating recruitment. Founding of Turning Point USA. TPUSA began humbly, with Kirk working out of his parents' garage and raising money through small donations. The organization's mission was straightforward: to identify, educate, train, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. Kirk's instincts about youth outreach were correct. While progressive organizations such as MoveOn.org and the Democratic Socialists of America had made inroads with young people, conservative messaging often lagged behind. Kirk sought to change this through energetic campus activism, bold messaging, and innovative use of social media. By 2013, TPUSA had already grown to dozens of chapters across U.S. colleges. Kirk traveled extensively, often speaking at small events with only a handful of students, but gradually expanding the organization's reach. His style combined humor, sharp political commentary, and a willingness to debate ideological opponents head-on. Early growth and strategy. TPUSA's growth strategy relied heavily on a few core principles. 1. Visual activism. The organization became known for eye-catching campus displays, such as free speech walls and big government sucks signs. These stunts attracted attention, sparked debate, and helped recruit new members. Kirk understood the power of platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram in mobilizing young people. TPUSA quickly built a strong digital presence with viral memes, shareable graphics, and short videos that distilled conservative ideas into accessible formats. Number 3. Decentralized organizing. TPUSA empowered students to create and run their own campus chapters, providing them with resources, talking points, and logistical support. This grassroots model allowed the organization to scale rapidly. By 2014, TPUSA had gained national media attention. Kirk appeared on Fox News and began cultivating relationships with prominent conservative donors. Wealthy backers such as Foster Friess and the Koch network contributed to the group's funding, enabling further expansion. Kirk as a rising star. As TPUSA grew, so did Kirk's profile. His youth made him a compelling figure in the conservative movement. At just 20 years old, he was addressing national conferences, debating liberal opponents, and presenting himself as a voice of his generation. His ability to simplify complex political arguments into sound bites made him particularly effective on television and radio. Statements like "big government sucks" or "socialism fails every time it's tried" became rallying cries for TPUSA's student base. While critics accused him of oversimplifying or engaging in demagoguery, his effectiveness in reaching young conservatives was undeniable. In 2015, TPUSA launched its annual Student Action Summit in Florida, drawing thousands of students and prominent conservative speakers. This event would become a signature feature of the organization, functioning as both a networking hub and a recruitment engine. Challenges and criticism. Despite its rapid growth, TPUSA faced criticism from both the left and the right. Progressive groups accused the organization of spreading misinformation, using divisive tactics, and promoting policies hostile to marginalized communities. Investigations by outlets like The New Yorker and The Washington Post questioned the group's funding sources and alleged links to wealthy Republican donors. Even within the conservative movement, Kirk encountered resistance. Some traditional conservatives dismissed him as inexperienced or overly focused on style rather than substance. Others worried that his rhetoric risked alienating moderates. Nevertheless, Kirk responded to criticism with defiance. He positioned himself as a fighter against what he described as the left's dominance of higher education. By framing himself as an underdog challenging entrenched institutions, he rallied supporters who saw him as an authentic representative of grassroots conservatism. Role in the 2016 election. The 2016 U.S. presidential election marked a turning point for Kirk and TPUSA. Initially, Kirk was skeptical of Donald Trump's candidacy, leaning more toward traditional conservatives. However, as Trump's movement gained momentum, Kirk embraced the populist energy reshaping the Republican Party. TPUSA largely avoided endorsing candidates directly, given its tax-exempt status, but its messaging aligned closely with Trump's emphasis on nationalism, economic growth, and opposition to political correctness. Kirk became a frequent defender of Trump in media appearances, earning praise from the president himself. The election validated Kirk's strategy of mobilizing young conservatives through culture, identity, and activism rather than dry policy debates. TPUSA's prominence soared in the years that followed. The year 2016 was a watershed moment in American politics, and for Charlie Kirk, it marked the transition from a youthful activist running a scrappy campus organization to a nationally recognized conservative voice aligned with the Trump movement. The election of Donald Trump redefined the Republican Party, and Kirk quickly adapted strategies to fit the populist wave. This second installment of Kirk's biography will cover the years between 2016 and 2020, detailing his national rise, the transformation of Turning Point USA into a political powerhouse, his close relationship with Trump's circle, and the controversies that further shaped his public image. Embracing the Trump movement. While Kirk had initially been skeptical of Donald Trump's unorthodox campaign style, he soon recognized the cultural shift that Trump embodied. Trump's willingness to confront the media, his blunt style, and his rejection of political correctness resonated with the very audiences Kirk sought to mobilize. By mid-2016, Kirk was openly supportive of Trump and began using TPUSA as a platform to amplify the president's message among students. Kirk's endorsement of Trump earned him access to powerful political figures. He was invited to events, met members of Trump's campaign team, and quickly positioned himself as a rising leader of the post-Tea Party generation of conservatives. His mastery of Twitter and his willingness to defend Trump on cable news made him a go-to surrogate for the president among young voters. By 2018, TPUSA had an estimated budget in the tens of millions, making it one of the most financially successful youth political organizations in U.S. history. Its headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona, became a hub of conservative activism, featuring state-of-the-art production studios, event planning divisions, and extensive training programs for student activists. Critics often pointed out that TPUSA operated more like a political marketing firm than a grassroots organization, but supporters saw this professionalism as evidence of its seriousness and ability to compete with well-funded progressive groups. Turning Point USA's growth. Under Kirk's leadership, TPUSA experienced explosive growth during the Trump era. By 2017, the organization claimed chapters on over 1,000 college campuses, though critics contested those numbers. TPUSA hosted large-scale conferences that attracted some of the most influential figures in conservative politics, including Donald Trump Jr., Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens, who later became one of the group's most prominent figures. The group's annual Student Action Summit became a major gathering point for conservative youth, These events blended politics with spectacle, massive stages, loud music, merchandise booths, and speeches that felt more like rallies than academic lectures. Kirk's ability to craft TPUSA into a cultural as well as political movement was central to its success. Media presence and the Charlie Kirk Show. Recognizing the need to expand his influence beyond campus activism, Kirk launched the Charlie Kirk Show, first as a podcast and later as a nationally syndicated radio program. The show combined political commentary with interviews, culture war debates, and calls to action for young conservatives. His style was combative and unapologetic, appealing to an audience that felt alienated by mainstream media. He regularly clashed with progressives on issues like socialism, immigration, and free speech, while also criticizing establishment Republicans for failing to embrace Trump's agenda. By 2018, Kirk had become one of the most visible young conservative commentators in America. Relationship with Trump and his administration. Kirk's loyalty to Donald Trump did not go unnoticed. Trump himself praised Kirk and PUSA on social media, calling them fantastic and commending their efforts to fight liberal dominance on campuses. Kirk was frequently invited to the White House, where he met not only with Trump, but also with senior advisors such as Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller. His proximity to the administration elevated his influence, making him more than just a campus activist. He became a bridge between the White House and conservative youth. One of Kirk's proudest moments came in 2019, when Trump delivered remarks at TPUSA's the Organization for Mobilizing Young Conservatives and offered direct encouragement to its members. This event cemented Kirk's reputation as one of Trump's most important allies in youth politics. Kirk was not only commenting on culture wars, he was actively shaping them. His public speaking tours were deliberately provocative, often focusing on hot-button issues such as immigration, policing, and gender identity. These debates were filmed and shared widely online, generating millions of views and creating viral moments that further boosted TPUSA's visibility. Kirk understood that in the age of digital media, virality itself was a form of political capital. Culture war politics. A defining feature of Kirk's activism during this period was his embrace of culture war issues. Rather than focusing heavily on detailed policy debates, Kirk emphasized themes such as free speech on campus. TPA frequently highlighted incidents in which conservative speakers were deplatformed or shouted down on college campuses, framing these moments as evidence of left-wing intolerance. Socialism versus capitalism. Kirk positioned TPU as a bulwark against rising interest in socialism among young Americans, branding it as a failed ideology responsible for historical tragedies. Patriotism and American exceptionalism. Kirk argued that progressive critiques of the U.S. undermine national pride and unity, contrasting this with TPUSA's celebration of the Constitution, the free market, and traditional values. These culture war battles proved highly effective for rallying a base of young conservatives who felt besieged by progressive cultural dominance. TPUSA controversies. With success came scrutiny. TPUSA faced numerous controversies during this period, ranging from internal disputes to allegations of misconduct. 1. Chapter scandals. Reports surfaced of TPUSA chapters engaging in inappropriate behavior, including racist jokes and offensive social media posts. Critics accused the organization of fostering a toxic culture, though Kirk maintained that such incidents were isolated and unrepresentative. 2. Funding transparency. Questions arose about TPUSA's financial backing. While the group boasted grassroots fundraising, investigations revealed significant support from wealthy Republican donors. This fueled criticism that TPUSA was less a student movement and more an AstroTurf operation. 3. Candace Owens rift. Owens, once a close ally, eventually departed TPUSA under tense circumstances. Her controversial statements on issues such as nationalism and Adolf Hitler created headaches for the organization. Although Kirk defended Owens initially, their split highlighted the challenges of managing high-profile personalities within the movement. Founding of Turning Point Action. In 2019, Kirk expanded TPUSA's reach by launching Turning Point Action, TPA, a 501c4 organization that could engage directly in electoral politics. While TPA remained technically nonpartisan, TPA allowed Kirk to explicitly campaign for candidates and coordinate more closely with the Republican Party. This move blurred the line between activism and electoral politics, solidifying Kirk's role as not only an activist, but also a political operator. TPA became instrumental in mobilizing young voters ahead of the 2020 election, particularly in battleground states. Kirk and the 2020 election. As the 2020 election approached, Kirk became a prominent voice defending Trump and rallying conservative voters. His Twitter feed often amplified pro-Trump talking points, criticized Democrats, and warned of threats from radical leftists. TPUSA and TPA organized bus tours, campus events, and digital campaigns aimed at boosting Republican turnout. Kirk often emphasized the need to fight not just Democrats, but also what he described as the cultural elites in Hollywood, academia, and the media. Despite these efforts, the 2020 election did not go as Kirk and his allies hoped. Trump lost to Joe Biden, sparking widespread claims of election fraud among the president's supporters. Kirk echoed these concerns, questioning the integrity of the election process and supporting efforts to challenge the results. Post-election fallout. Following the 2020 election, Kirk found himself at the center of controversy. TPUSA's Students for Trump initiative had strongly backed Trump's re-election, and when the results were contested, Kirk played a vocal role in spreading skepticism about the outcome. One particularly contentious moment came in January 2021, when it was revealed that Kirk's organizations had helped transport attendees to the Stop the Steal rally in Washington, D.C. on January 6. While Kirk condemned the violence that later unfolded at the Capitol, critics accused him of contributing to the charged atmosphere that led to the riots. This episode damaged his reputation among some conservatives who sought to distance themselves from the events, but it also solidified his standing among Trump's most loyal supporters, who admired his willingness to challenge the establishment. The year 2021 ushered in a new era for Charlie Kirk and the conservative movement. The defeat of Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election and the subsequent storming of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th marked both a moment of crisis and an opportunity for reinvention. For Kirk, the challenge was twofold: to preserve his influence within the conservative movement despite Trump's exit from the White House, and to navigate the growing divide between establishment Republicans and the more populist Trump-aligned base. This section of Kirk's biography examines his role in the immediate aftermath of the 2020 election, his navigation of the January 6th controversy, the evolution of Turning Point USA in a post-Trump political environment, and his growing involvement in shaping cultural and religious conservatism. January 6th and its aftermath. The Stop the Steal movement placed Kirk at the center of national controversy. Prior to January 6th, his group, Turning Point Action, had organized buses to bring participants to Washington, D.C. for the rally where Trump delivered his speech, claiming the election had been stolen. Although Kirk condemned the violence that ensued at the Capitol, critics charged that his rhetoric contributed to the atmosphere of distrust and hostility. Media outlets highlighted his role in amplifying claims of election fraud, painting him as one of the figures who legitimized conspiracy theories. Kirk responded by drawing a distinction between peaceful protest and unlawful violence. He argued that conservatives had the right to challenge what they saw as irregularities in the electoral process, but insisted he had never called for unlawful action. While this defense did little to quiet critics, it resonated with his supporters, who saw him as a scapegoat for broader political unrest. Kirk's pivot to faith-based organizing represented a calculated recognition of the centrality of religion in American conservatism. By positioning TPUSA Faith as a partner to churches, Kirk effectively expanded the organization's recruitment base from college students to entire families. This broadened TPUS's influence significantly, enabling it to shape cultural conversations far beyond campus walls. The move also highlighted Kirk's skill in identifying new arenas for activism and quickly establishing a presence within them. TPUSA's rebranding and expansion. After January 6th, Kirk faced pressure to stabilize TPUSA's image. Rather than retreat, he doubled down on expanding the organization's influence in new arenas. 1. Faith-based outreach. Kirk emphasized religious conservatism more heavily, framing TPUSA's mission as not just political but spiritual. His speeches increasingly invoked biblical themes, positioning America's challenges as a struggle between good and evil. In 2021, Kirk launched Turning Point Faith, an initiative designed to mobilize evangelical churches and religious communities in defense of conservative values. This move solidified his alliance with Christian conservatives and widened his base beyond college campuses. Number 3, media expansion. Kirk continued to grow The Charlie Kirk Show, which became a central platform for his commentary on current events. His show often blended politics, culture, and religion, reflecting his growing interest in uniting these spheres. TPUSA also maintained its signature youth conferences with increasingly high-profile speakers and larger crowds. By 2022, events such as the America Fest conference drew thousands of young conservatives and featured appearances from Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even members of Trump's family. Cultural focus and the rise of anti-woke politics. In the post-Trump era, Kirk positioned himself as a leading voice in the fight against woke culture. His rhetoric focused less on traditional Republican issues such as taxes or deregulation and more on social and cultural debates. Critical race theory, CRT. Kirk made opposition to CRT a central theme of his activism, claiming it divided Americans along racial lines and promoted resentment. Transgender issues. He became an outspoken critic of transgender policies in schools and sports, framing them as an assault on biological reality and family values. Education battles. Kirk frequently criticized public schools and universities, arguing they indoctrinated students with leftist ideology. This emphasis on cultural issues kept him relevant in conservative circles, even as Trump's direct influence fluctuated. Kirk became one of the central figures in the broader anti-woke movement that galvanized conservatives across the country. Growing relationship with religious conservatism. Perhaps the most significant evolution in Kirk's career during this period was his embrace of Christian nationalism. While he had always identified as a person of faith, post-2020, he leaned more heavily into religious rhetoric. At events hosted by Turning Point Faith, Kirk framed political issues in explicitly biblical terms, often quoting scripture and urging attendees to view their activism as a divine mission. He developed close ties with prominent pastors and Christian leaders, making churches a major new frontier for conservative mobilization. This shift helped Kirk secure influence with evangelical communities, long considered a crucial voting bloc within the Republican Party. By aligning politics with religious conviction, Kirk sought to build a movement that extended beyond electoral cycles and into cultural permanence. Media influence and daily commentary. By 2022, The Charlie Kirk Show had become one of the most listened to podcasts in conservative media. Kirk used the platform not only to comment on daily political events, but also to shape narratives within the movement. He often invited high-profile guests, including politicians, media personalities, and pastors. His topics ranged from foreign policy to pop culture, but always through the lens of conservative identity. The show's tone was confrontational, unapologetic, and designed to mobilize rather than moderate. This expansion into media solidified Kirk's reputation as more than an activist. He was now a full-fledged media personality. The midterms of 2022. The 2022 midterm elections represented an important test for Kirk's influence. Through Turning Point action, he and his allies campaigned heavily for Republican candidates, especially those aligned with Trump's populist vision. While Republicans failed to secure a sweeping red wave, they did capture control of the House of Representatives. Kirk claimed partial credit for mobilizing young voters and evangelicals, though critics argued his influence was overstated. Regardless, the midterms reinforced his role as a power broker within the conservative coalition. Criticism and pushback. Despite his growing stature, Kirk remained a polarizing figure. From the left, progressives accused him of spreading disinformation, demonizing marginalized groups, and fueling extremism. Publications such as The New Yorker and The Washington Post continued to scrutinize TPUSA's finances and tactics. From the right, even within conservatism, some accused Kirk of prioritizing spectacle over substance. Intellectual conservatives questioned whether his soundbite-driven style advanced meaningful policy. Others expressed concern about his increasing embrace of Christian nationalism, fearing it might alienate secular conservatives. Kirk brushed off such criticism, often using it to rally his base by portraying himself as under attack by powerful elites. 2023 and the road ahead. By 2023, Kirk had fully cemented his role as one of the leading voices of the post-Trump conservative movement. His organization, Turning Point USA, was no longer just a campus group, but a multifaceted institution with branches in politics, media, and faith communities. At TPUSA events, Kirk continued to draw large crowds of young conservatives eager to hear his message. He portrayed the United States as being at a crossroads, with the future of freedom and faith hanging in the balance. His speeches emphasized urgency, declaring that conservatives could not afford complacency in the face of cultural decline. By the mid-2020s, Charlie Kirk had established himself as more than just a student activist. He had become one of the most influential voices in American conservatism. His journey from suburban Illinois to national prominence reflected broader shifts within the Republican Party and the conservative movement at large. The final part of this biography examines Kirk's role in shaping conservatism in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election, his long-term ambitions, the criticisms and challenges he continues to face, and the potential legacy he hopes to leave behind. The road to 2024. As the 2024 election cycle began, Kirk's influence was evident. Through Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action, he had built a network that reached millions of young voters, evangelical Christians, and grassroots activists. His events consistently drew large crowds, and his media presence remained strong through the Charlie Kirk Show and daily appearances on conservative television and podcasts. Kirk positioned himself as a key supporter of Donald Trump's bid for a return to the White House. He openly endorsed Trump early in the cycle and used his platform to promote the former president's agenda while criticizing Trump's rivals in the Republican primary. By aligning closely with Trump, Kirk maintained his role as a bridge between the MAGA base and younger conservatives. At the same time, he emphasized the importance of cultural battles over policy disputes. His messaging suggested that the future of the United States depended less on tax rates or regulatory reform and more on questions of identity, morality, and values. Turning Point USA's institutional growth. By 2024, TPUSA was no longer a scrappy startup, but a polished, well-funded institution with multiple branches and initiatives. 1. Turning Point Action, focused on electoral politics, including voter registration, canvassing, and digital campaigning. 2. Turning Point Faith, dedicated to mobilizing churches and faith communities in defense of conservative values. 3. Turning Point Academy, an educational initiative aimed at promoting alternative curricula and resources for parents dissatisfied with public education. 4. Turning Point Live, a growing media wing producing digital content, streaming shows, and conferences. These branches made TPUSA one of the most versatile organizations in conservative politics, able to operate simultaneously in political, cultural, and religious spheres. Kirk's impact on influence on the conservative cannot be overstated. He tapped into generational frustration with progressive dominance in higher education and media, offering students a sense of belonging and purpose within the conservative movement. His ability to simplify complex issues into catchy slogans or viral memes allowed TPUS to thrive in the digital age. At the same time, this approach drew criticism for lacking intellectual depth. Some conservative scholars lamented that Kirk's style encouraged performative activism rather than thoughtful engagement with political philosophy. Still, his success in mobilization could not be denied, and many credited him with revitalizing conservative youth outreach. Criticism and controversy in the 2020s. As Kirk's profile grew, so did his critics. Accusations of extremism. Progressives accused him of legitimizing conspiracy theories, particularly in the aftermath of the 2020 election. His embrace of Christian nationalist rhetoric drew sharp criticism from civil liberties groups. Internal conservative critiques. Figures within the conservative establishment accused Kirk of prioritizing spectacle over substance. Some worried that his confrontational style risked alienating swing voters. Media scrutiny. Investigations into TPUSA's finances and internal operations continued, with journalists questioning the group's donor transparency and chapter accountability. Kirk consistently dismissed these criticisms as attempts to discredit him, framing himself as a target of the liberal elite. This defiance only endeared him further to his base, who saw him as a fighter unafraid to challenge powerful institutions. Kirk's embrace of religious rhetoric was not without controversy even among conservatives. Some saw it as a genuine expression of faith, while others perceived it as a political strategy designed to solidify support among evangelicals. Regardless of motivation, the impact was undeniable. Kirk became a regular speaker at church conferences and faith rallies, and TPUSA faith chapters began forming across the country. This blending of politics and religion intensified debates about the role of Christianity in American governance and the future of the conservative movement. Religious turn and Christian nationalism. One of the defining shifts in Kirk's career during the 2020s was his deepening embrace of religious conservatism. Through Turning Point Faith, he made the case that America's political battles were inseparable from its spiritual ones. Kirk argued that secularism, progressive cultural policies, and attacks on traditional family structures represented not just political challenges but moral crises. By invoking Christian language and themes, he sought to anchor conservatism in a framework that transcended electoral politics. This alignment with Christian nationalism sparked heated debate. Supporters hailed it as a return to America's founding values, while critics warned that it threatened religious pluralism and democracy. Leadership style and public persona. Kirk's leadership style combined charisma, strategic messaging, and relentless activism. He cultivated a persona that was both combative and relatable. A young man who had chosen activism over college, who spoke directly to the frustrations of ordinary conservatives, and who embodied the idea of fighting back against elites. However, his reliance on sound bites and confrontational rhetoric raised questions about long-term sustainability. Could Kirk evolve from a provocateur into a statesman-like figure, or was his influence tied to the high-energy style of populist politics? Future ambitions. Speculation about Kirk's future has long surrounded his career. Some observers believe he may eventually run for political office, perhaps in his home state of Illinois, or in a friendlier conservative state. Others argue that his talents lie in organizing, mobilizing, and media, suggesting he may prefer to remain a movement leader rather than an elected official. Regardless of his personal ambitions, Kirk has made it clear that he intends to remain at the center of conservative activism. His investments in media, faith outreach, and educational initiatives suggest he is building institutions designed to outlast individual election cycles. If Kirk's long-term legacy is measured in institutional impact, TPUSA will stand as his most enduring contribution. By creating a permanent structure for conservative youth engagement, he has ensured that future generations will have access to the resources, training, and community that TPUSA provides. Even if his critics dismiss his rhetoric as simplistic, the organizational model he pioneered, fast, decentralized, and media-savvy, has already influenced how both political parties think about youth outreach. Potential legacy. Charlie Kirk's legacy will ultimately depend on how history judges the populist wave of the 2010s and 2020s. If the Trump-aligned movement reshapes the Republican Party for decades, Kirk will be remembered as one of its key architects, particularly in mobilizing youth and faith communities. If, however, the movement fades or fractures, critics may portray him as a figure who capitalized on a cultural moment but failed to build lasting ideological depth. Either way, his impact on conservative organizing is undeniable. Few figures have done more to energize young conservatives in the 21st century.